Welcome back to the show. Once again, this is a very special program today, and we have a special website to share with you as well. It is LejeuneRelief.com. Once again, LejeuneRelief.com. We're talking about a case of water contamination at Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina. It happened from 1953 to 1987. And so during that time frame, people were filing claims that were affected by what was happening through the water contamination there. However, the statute of limitations ran out, but it has been reopened now. And Sarah Stump, one of the attorneys from the Whitley Law Firm, is joining us in studio. Sarah, I know you work on a lot of these complex cases, these mass torts. So what has happened in this case now?
Thank you, Drew. So the cases are basically open again. There have been historically 2 attempts to get the compensation for victims who have consumed and been exposed to this water. And those 2 historical attempts fell short.
Okay.
One was an MDL, a multi-district litigation, which is a lot like a class action. That involved 850 of these, injured plaintiffs, and the case was dismissed because of the statute of repose that North Carolina has here. We have a 10-year statute of repose, which is something that, from my point of view, is put in place a lot of the times to protect the defendants that we end up going after.
Okay.
So, the idea behind it is you have 10 years from the time that you consume a product to bring a claim that it harmed you or that it was dangerous. So the issue here is we're dealing with claims from people who lived on the base from 1953 to 1987, as you said. So, the dangers of this water were not made clear in time to bring these suits. So this is why the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 is so significant. It's doing away with that limitation. So the way we see it, those claims, could come back on the table. And the other historic attempt to get these folks compensation was successful. It was an act maybe about 10 years ago that resulted in the soldiers getting some form of disability relief.
Okay.
So, and that was a step in the right direction.
Right.
But in our opinion, it wasn't enough. And also it excluded the family members of these soldiers. And as we know, the family members were on base as well. They were living there. And then some folks who, weren't soldiers worked on the base.
So we do have a graphic we want to share with our folks at home watching the program today. And in this graphic, the Camp Lejeune water contamination, and we talk about the exposure dates of when we just mentioned 1953 to 1987. You had to have been on the base for 30 days or more, correct?
Yes, 30 consecutive days during that almost 30-year period. So we think that that's a pretty broad amount of time.
Right.
So we would encourage you to give us a call if you think that you were on base or close enough to that base where you were using the base's water supply.
So you don't, it affects, not just the Marine
Right.
who was on the base, but it could be, as we said on the graphic, a Marine dependent. So it could be a spouse, it could be a child, right?
Yes.
And other civilians that were working on the base during that time, right?
Yes, exactly. And then another, improvement on this litigation is that it will include birth injuries. It'll include any in utero injuries that might have been sustained during pregnancies of women who lived on the base at the time and drank the water.
So I have an interesting scenario around this. I was talking to a woman who is a Marine spouse whose son had a lot of health issues at the age of 2, and the doctor said, this is so rare, we hardly ever see this. So that could be a situation where that person might be able to file a claim. Is that right?
Right, absolutely, absolutely. So if the pregnancy happened, during that time frame, and the woman was in that place, then absolutely. The injuries and the maladies that we're seeing are very broad. So we see anything from neurological defects, we see cardiac defects, spina bifida. There was a study published in 2013 by the CDC that was specifically focused on Camp Lejeune births, and the study said that the babies born under these circumstances had a 4 times higher likelihood of having one of these birth defects or birth injuries.
We have another graphic to show that also talks about those diseases that you were mentioning, such as different types of cancers, fertility issues, Parkinson's disease, autoimmune, all types of problems, right?
Yes, exactly. And the reason that there are so many injuries and so many types of cancers included is because these chemicals were very dangerous and they're very potent. So that water supply had, I think, over 70 toxic chemicals in it, but specifically there were 2 extremely dangerous ones. They go by PCE and TCE, trichloroethylene and tetrachloroethylene. And they do have some uniquities between the 2, but essentially both are cleaning agents. So,
wow, okay.
Yeah. So what these chemicals do when you are exposed is, you can be exposed by dermal contact, by oral consumption, and even inhalation. So it's very easy to get this stuff in your system. And once it's in your system, it targets your central nervous system. It gets in your bloodstream, and after that, it really could go anywhere.
Now, as we know, the Marine Corps and other branches of service employ a lot of civilian contractors, right? So tell me about those civilian contractors that maybe were working on base during this time.
Right.
And could their spouses or offspring be affected as well?
I would say it's all about whether, they were using or had access to or were exposed to this water source at Camp Lejeune. So certainly if you're a contractor working on the base during that time period, then you would have been exposed. As for their family members.
Right, and then you would have to show the 30 consecutive days.
Right.
So think about that, Ben, and what kind of documentation would someone need that, if you're watching the program right now, by the way, a great first step is the LejeuneRelief.com website, because that answers all the questions that you probably are going through your mind right now as you're watching our program. It'll be very in-depth where you'll get a lot of information. But thinking about documentation, I know in other programs we've talked about how important it is for a claimant to have documentation.
So, it's really impressive to me that this legislation was passed in a bipartisan method. That in today's climate that doesn't happen very often. But that tells you how important it was that the government felt that they need to do something for these people. And Sarah and I have read the statute, and it makes it's pretty loose as far as saying that you've got to be able to tie it to it, but it hasn't specifically laid out specific documents that you have to have.
Okay.
So anything that would document or prove the fact that you were there, and we're talking about a period of time that was a long time ago. So family photos, old military IDs, anything like old letters that you may have that have your address. Okay. All of those kinds of keepsakes, or anything that you can tie back to being able to show that you were on base at that time. If this is a pursuing of a wrongful death claim, if it's a family member that died of one of those listed diseases that we think are covered right now, death certificates with cause of death. Those types of documents are public record and can be accessed and researched. We still are working on the proof and how to prove with the in utero claims, and that's an evolving kind of a way to do it. And that's why we want people to go to this website, learn about the claims, and stay in touch with us, because it's free for us to evaluate the case. It's
no cost to you.
Right. So even if you think that you may be able to prove it, you don't know, or you had someone and you just want to find more information, don't be afraid to call, because it's free. Sarah and I, or some of our staff, will talk to you, and we'll be able to kind of guide you through other items, some other ideas of ways to prove that you were there at that time. But it's going to be open for 2 years. So it's going to be a certain amount of time. So I encourage folks that are out there that are watching this now, to act now. There's really, even though 2 years sounds like it's a long time, to get all of these items together and to process these claims, because they are actual lawsuits. They're going to be lawsuits being filed.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, but Sarah and Ben going to be right back with us to talk much more about this very important topic. You're watching Attorneys on Call. Back in just a moment.